Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reclaim Leader podcast. It's so good to be with you again. Jesse and Jason here, just talking church. Again, we're two pastors in the trenches like you, trying to figure out life and ministry. And so glad you could join us today. I mean, listen, to all of our new folks, a special welcome to you. I hope this is helpful. Don't be afraid to reach out, Jason or Jesse at reclaimleader.com. For those who've been with us on this journey together for a long time, some of you have been with us. You're OGs. You've been with us since episode 1. And
that's a long time to be listening. So thank you for that. Thanks for putting up with us and talking shop with us. And, you know, we're two pastors in the trenches, as you mentioned. And, you know, it depends on the week how deep the trench is, right? It's like,
dude, that's for real.
Just
someday we'll have a podcast based on all the pre-recording talk that we have.
Our best conversations are before we.
They are not for prime time. I'll tell you that much.
Figuring it out as we go.
But yeah, so today we're talking about something that I first heard this idea back in 2017, right around when we started the podcast. It was I was attending a conference. It was a fall conference, so it couldn't have been the North Point conference. I think it might have been a Catalyst conference.
Okay.
That I went to and heard Carey Nieuwhof talking about the difference between strategy and culture.
Sure.
And I thought this was an interesting idea to probe because I found that it's something that often gets neglected or confused.
Yeah.
Because I think I don't know if it's a generational thing. I definitely know pastors in the generation ahead of me, the baby boomers, they were really big on best practices.
Sure.
And I think best practices are great, but I'm also really, you got to be really careful with them because you can't just best practice your way to a flourishing, healthy church. You have to have done some foundational work behind that. Best practices are really just sort of like an idea generator or to confirm your ideas aren't crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. What works to get people to do this thing or learn this thing or whatever. Yeah.
So anyway, from this talk, I'm going to take a few points. I went back to my old notes and just took a look at some of the things he said because they've really been pretty foundational and I needed to hear them in that stage of our ministry. Mm-hmm. And then I want to riff a little bit on what's the difference between strategy and church culture and why does that matter? Because it does. And hopefully this will help pastors kind of think through this as well, because I don't know that we're so busy in it, Jesse, that I don't think we get to kind of think big picture.
We don't get on the balcony very often, you know, so if you're working in it all the time, you can't work on it or think on it. And so, sometimes you got to step back and then look down in and go, how's it going? So I'm glad we're having this kind of conversation because it's definitely one of those.
Yeah. So I want to first on the front end say strategy is incredibly important. So please don't hear that I think we should ditch all your strategies and just do this sort of vague thing. That's not it. But there's something that happens that I would say leads to good strategies because strategies come and go. Strategies change. Mm-hmm. What was that Andy Stanley saying? What's that? Date your strategy, marry your mission. Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And the reason is because strategies have a shelf life. Mm-hmm. And your vision and mission or the way that you kind of see things, the culture that you're trying to create as a church, that's much bigger than any particular strategy. So that's why I always say, like, kind of diving in here, again, strategies are important, but your church's culture is even more important to nail down and to figure out and to cultivate.
That's right. And your strategies, like you said, they have a shelf life. They have a term in which they will be effective. And then something will shift and you'll need to try a different approach. And we'll probably get into this a little bit, but sometimes when we feel ourselves having to manufacture energy to get excited about a strategy, it might be a sign that strategy is coming towards a close and we need to move on to something else. And so strategies come and go, but a culture, a vision, a mission is what we're after for the long haul. And we need to stick with that and be willing to hold our strategies a little more loosely.
Yeah. So let's say, hey, we want to try to reach young adults. And so our strategy is going to be, we're going to have a series of volleyball events down at the bottom of the hill where we are. And, we're going to have pizza and volleyball. And that's what we're going to do. That's fine. But I think even before I make that decision, I want to say, let's create a culture where we help the next generation win, when we help set them up in a relationship with Jesus. I think that happens first. The culture starts first, and then the strategy sort
and
of.
the ideas come out of that culture
yeah.
or that. Yeah, I think that's so spot on. And giving yourself permission, and even when you can work toward this, I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because if you can work towards a healthy, vibrant culture around your vision and mission and commitment to it, and a way of being and working together, then awesome strategies are going to come out of that. And when it's time to bring a certain strategy to an end, when it's time for the volleyball and pizza idea to stop and to then go bowling instead, or whatever the next idea is, it's going to be easier to make that transition, and there'll be less heartache, because it'll be rooted in a different kind of place. That we didn't marry our strategy. We have this other thing that we're committed to even more.
Yeah. So here's some bullet points from Carey Nieuwhof's talk that I just liked. I just want to do this quickly. I'll kind of go through some of these ideas to set up what I want to say next. But he had a few quotes that I wrote down in those notes. One was, vision and mission often isn't the problem. It's usually strategy. And then he goes on to talk about, if you're clear about who you are as a church, it actually creates deep fear, because ambiguity isn't scary. But although trying to create a culture at your church might divide people at first, eventually it leads to better unity. So it may cause some division on the front end. You're like, yeah, we want to be this church. This is the culture that we want to create. And maybe some will be like, I don't know, it's not the church that we've always been, or whatever. But in the end, it creates unity. Actually, I have found that when you're trying to create a culture and you say, this is who we are, you sort of put your stake in the sand. You say, this is who we are as a church, and this is who we're trying to reach. I actually don't find a lot of division in that. I find way more unity in that, because people see it gets very clear. Okay, so if that's true, what sort of church do we have to become to do those things that we're hoping to do? That's really what culture is about, right? How do we become the church we're supposed to be in order to do the things we feel God calling us to do?
Yeah. Who are we as we live out our mission together? I mean, I love that. So what's our culture to approach our vision and mission? And one of the things that's been part of our culture for the last 15 years around here is it's culture of willingness to risk. We take risks for the sake of the vision and the mission. I love that part of our culture. I'm like, so people will quote, they'd be like, I love that we try things. I love that we go for it. I love that we take risks. Well, and now the longer I've been here, I'm like, but I'm like, no, it's part of our culture. It's who we are as we do our work together, and we try things and we see what happens, and then we evaluate and adjust and all that stuff, but we go for it. And I love that. I love that about our life together. So I don't know, what's a part of your culture, Jason, that you go, I love this about our way of doing our work together?
I love that we are always thinking about the people who are coming back to church or to church for the first time in a long time, who have just mustered the courage to show up. And I love the fact that now all across our organization, we're always thinking about, how do we create soft landings for people in each area of the ministry? How do we make sure we're, again, just a soft landing? Is our messaging clear? When they get here, do they know what to do? Do they know what to do next? Are we welcoming them appropriately? Are we not smothering them? Are we helping them to make connections with Jesus and with one another? And I think those are things we do really, really well.
Yeah.
So kind of like the welcome mat of the church is really strong.
I love it. And I think that's a good way to think about it. One of the things I love about our church is fill in the blank. Yeah. You're going to describe your culture. Now, there's the not so good side of that too. The flip side is the culture that exists is what you've either created or allowed, and there are probably some not so healthy parts of culture. And do we want to talk about any of those related to our church? I mean,
No way. You talking about your church?
yeah. No, I'm like, what would I say about that? Well, I think one of the unhealthy parts of our culture can be at sometimes we assume everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And so, and I would say that's maybe more on the staff side or on the insider side of things. We kind of assume that everybody knows when the event is and what the expectations are. So the part that you guys are working really hard to do well for the sake of new people, I think we have a little bit of a culture of insiderness that needs to be addressed. And I go, I don't like that about us, that someone new comes in and they're like, I know a lot of awesome things are happening. How do I find out about them? How do I get plugged into those things? Yeah. I may be way oversensitive to that, but it does feel a little bit like it's part of our culture, is that you're either in the know or you got to work hard to find out. And I go, I don't know if I like that about that part of our culture.
Well, and Carey Nieuwhof was quoting Andy Stanley in that talk, and he said that phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that is so important to remember, because if you have an unhealthy culture, you might have an excellent strategy that gets sabotaged because the culture doesn't support it.
That's right.
Or, like a rubber band that will only go so far and then snap back. It's going to snap back to whatever your culture is.
Yeah. And I think there are aspects of culture where things are really healthy and flourishing. You might have a culture that has some really strong, healthy parts, and then some parts that you're like, we need to work on this part of our culture. And so we have a really strong culture of collaboration. We are a team from top to bottom, really flat organization. Some of our best ideas come from the ground up, and we don't feel this pressure to be experts and all that if we're in staff, and we're facilitators, we're collaborators with people. I love that about our culture. So there's some really positive things in culture, but then but this part of our culture, we need to work on or whatever, because if we're going to have really good strategies and really excellent movement toward our vision and mission, if we're really going to be a flourishing church that makes disciples, we got to fix this. We got to work on this part of our life together.
Yeah. And, again, strategies are good. Culture is king. But let's unpack a little bit. What do we mean about culture?
Yeah.
I was thinking about this, like, I guess you would probably use the language of tribes, when you're talking about sort of different groups of people. But I think it speaks to what basically culture means to me. And that is, when I was in high school, Jesse, do you know there's a time I had a mullet, and it is not recorded in any known picture of me,
I can see it, man.
Which I'm really thankful, by the way.
I think you might want to bring it back.
Because the thing back in the day was to grow the mullet so that under your football helmet, it would stick out the back. That was
it's got to flip up a little bit behind.
Exactly right.
Helmet. Yeah.
So my junior year, it existed. I think there's one video, because in an English class, we had to do a video presentation. It's there. I don't know what kid has that video. It exists somewhere. That's the only known recording. Anyway.
Well, I'm glad there's a record out there that somebody.
I was thinking about my group of friends, and we had our own language.
Yeah.
We had so much slang and inside talk that sometimes, like, if my parents would hear us talk, they had no idea what we were saying. And it was really funny. Yeah. We all kind of dressed the same. We listened to similar music. We had shared values, and we had shared customs and traditions with each other, even just, our group of people. And I think about what it was like inviting new people into our culture.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of explaining that had to happen. And we had to decide, was this person going to mess up the culture? Because we're all sort of guardians of this culture that we loved as a friend group.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, that's basically what I mean, or what I think of when I think of cultures and creating a church culture. It shows up in how we talk and how we interact, and our shared values and our shared customs and our shared traditions, the way that we do life together. And if we're going to choose to do something, let's make sure it's within the bounds of the culture that we're shooting for. And because not everything's going to be a fit. Not everything's going to be good for the culture we're trying to create. So that's kind of a very loose, non-sociological definition of culture.
I'm sure there's sociologists out there.
Oh man, there's so many better ones, I'm sure. But that's just how I see it.
But yeah, I think it's who we are in our unique way as a community of people, and the things that we do as we function together and live out our life together. And yeah, it's our culture. So it's going to be a learning curve for people that are coming into it, and hopefully they can contribute to the culture. But it's also going to be what sets the tone for what we do and how we express our life together, and the things that we do related to our vision mission. The strategies that we're going to use to accomplish those things are going to be an expression, hopefully, of our culture. Well, no, hopefully they will be an expression of our culture. Whether it's a healthy culture or not will be the deciding factor on whether those strategies end up serving our vision and mission well, I think. So
Yeah.
working toward a healthy culture is so crucially important, but it's not a simple thing.
It's not. And it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time. So a classic example is small groups.
Yeah.
We're not a church that had a small group anything. We're very traditional Presbyterian church. We have women's circles and men Bible studies. Mostly retired guys. They meet super early in the morning, in the middle of the week, so guys who are working probably aren't going to show up. And so when we first started talking about small groups, nobody knew what the heck we were talking about. And then, so we had to spend a lot of time explaining what they were. And even when we started, there just wasn't a lot of traction, because why? Our culture was not that we're a church that has small groups.
Mm-hmm.
That just wasn't our culture. So everything was always fighting against it. In fact, there was some friction with the existing groups as well. Why are you starting this new thing? We could use more support, or we can use, we want to recruit more people to do the thing we're already doing. And there was some tension in there trying to figure out, yeah, but we kind of have this new vision. We want to do more short-term things where people who are newer to a group situation or brand new, never did it before, feel like it's a right-sized commitment for them.
Mm-hmm.
And what would it look like to change that a bit? Do you know, small groups never took off. It took a long time, where it was like fits and starts for a good, 6 years. It was fits and starts, not much movement. But you know what happened over that time? We just kept talking about it.
Yeah.
Small groups, and circles are better than rows. And we're the kind of church that gets people together. And what happened was, over that time, it became our culture. And then the strategy took off.
Right.
Small groups went crazy. And we went from having a couple dozen people to like 350 signups.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to happen all at once, but it didn't. It was a slow build of culture change.
That's right.
And that's why. So at first, the strategy wasn't really working because the culture wouldn't allow it.
That's right.
You had to change the culture first, and then it took off.
Yeah, and I think that's the culture piece is really important. What's the quote? Success and failure both happen gradually, then suddenly. Yeah. And so it's like this long investment in a culture of, we think smaller groups matter. We think being in closer community for discipleship matters. We think, and you're just building that and building it and building that. And eventually, the strategy and culture meet up, and that's where some really good things begin to take place. But it's almost like the strategy had to be there, and then building a culture to support the strategy sometimes as leaders, we got to do it that direction. We're like, this is the thing we want to see happen. But man, we got to lay the groundwork of a culture that values that before we're really going to see a fruitfulness from that strategy. Yeah. So it's tough. 6 years of just kind of going.
That's probably not really encouraging to people. Like 6 years. Oh, geez,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to wait that long, but
a long time.
But I think the question is, how do you shape a culture, or how do you reshape a culture, and how do you do it in the church? So there's a few things that I have seen work in my context and in other people's context. And Jesse, please jump in with whatever you've seen as well. I'm sure a lot of it's the same. But the first thing is kind of what I said about small groups. You have to inspire with vision on repeat. You have to post it everywhere. You have to say it all the time. It's got to be in everything that you do. So one thing when we were shaping our mission and vision and getting people to, hey, we're a church for all generations, we mentioned that last episode, is we started putting it at the top of every session meeting, every meeting that I ran. Our mission and vision statements are at the top of the paper of the agenda.
Yeah.
I talked about it all the time. Every time I do a vision series, which is usually once a year, we talk about the mission and vision. It's something that's a North Star for our decision making. Hey, are we going to say yes to this ask? No, it doesn't fit in our mission and vision. So you do that long enough and it becomes your thing. Gwinnett Church, which was a plant of North Point, and now Gwinnett's planted churches. So it's like incredibly successful as far as churches go. Gwinnett Church has a a tree sculpture on their campus, and it looks really funky. It's got all these weird like metal circles around it.
Mhm.
And if you look, it's their logo. And although I don't know what that means, I remember them talking about it. Jeff Henderson was talking about it and saying it had deep meaning for the people that planted the church and for the people to understand what the church was about. So they put a piece of architecture on their campus of that funky tree, and it became their logo. So their vision of who they want to be, who they see themselves, is literally baked into everything that they're doing. There's even a sculpture on campus, right? It's
Yeah,
just
that's super
part
cool.
of their DNA.
Reinforcing the culture. Reinforcing the culture. Yeah.
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 And then the second thing is celebrate when you see behavior that you want to reinforce.
Mhm.
What gets celebrated gets repeated. And I think the way to do that is look for stories that show people that represent what the culture it is that you're trying to achieve. And so we do that. We do kind of shout outs for people to hear, you know, when a story of a volunteer doing something, or somebody in the life of the church just doing something. We try to celebrate those stories that demonstrate this is the kind of church that we are striving to be.
Right.
This is the culture we're trying to create.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and bringing those stories out into the open and going, I love that. You know, it's that noticing and being specific. And I think about our welcome. When I see one of our welcome hosts see a guest and like walk them to the children's check-in instead of just pointing them down the hall, I'm like, that's the culture. That's it. That's hospitality. That's who we want to be.
Yeah.
So I think that goes a long way. Just reinforcing that over time. And what notices what gets repeated, I think that's spot on. And I would add into this too, and I mean, this is implied, I think, throughout all of it, but leaders go first.
Yeah.
Like, we have to live the culture that we expect to see other people or hope to see take root. And so if we want a culture of hospitality and we're indifferent to anybody that's new or a guest or someone that's looking to find their way, then it's never going to take root. And so for people to see us also doing the kinds of behaviors that we want to associate with our culture, I think is crucially important.
Yeah. Third, create an environment that fosters the desired result. So what do I mean? If I were saying, okay, hey, listen, I'm going to get 5 or 6 guys together and just have a talk about what's going on in our lives and everything, what environment would I try to cultivate? Which would be better, Jesse? Where we meet around a campfire at someone's home, or we meet in the waiting room of a doctor's office? Right. Okay. So obviously the answer is fireside, but why? Because it's an intimate conversation. We want to make sure that it feels safe when you're sitting around the fire. It feels like you can just sort of talk. It's informal. It's, you know, the lighting matters to feel vulnerable enough to share. In a waiting room, it couldn't be any more the opposite of that. And so taking that idea, is the environment we're creating for whatever ministry thing we're trying to do, is it fostering the desired results? So what's the environment that creates us being a church like this?
That's right.
Like how do we become a welcoming church? Well, we smile. We put people with gifts of hospitality on the front lines.
Yeah.
We make sure that we're thinking about, like you said, walking people to the next thing, making sure that we are loving them as they show up, meeting them where they are, and then taking them hopefully where they want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Culture and environment are so closely connected. It's hard to even separate them out, but thinking in terms of an environment maybe is a way for some people to think about culture. What's the relational environment that you're seeking to create?
Yeah.
What's the tone of the environment? What's the feeling of the environment? Because all that is part of the culture of a church. If it's, you know, if the temperature in the sanctuary is too cold and there's no music as people are coming in, and it's just it's like somber and kind of cold, and people are, I mean, so that environment is going to sort of say something about what's the culture of our church like. Well, it's kind of cold and stiff and quiet around here. I don't know. So all those things matter and add up, and are, I think, become over time expressions of the culture. So one of the things that happens at Marine View is people gather before and after the service, and they're even talking kind of spread out in the sanctuary with each other. And every so often someone will say, I want to come to church and I want it to be quiet in the sanctuary so I can do some reflection before worship begins. And I say, I appreciate that so much. But isn't it awesome that people come together here and immediately want to connect with each other and catch up about life and all that? And that's the culture that's our culture. And so that's kind of how we approach our environments. But it's not for everybody either. So that's part of the other piece of culture. Some people will come and resonate with our culture, and others will go, maybe that's not for me. And that's okay too.
Yeah. Then fourth, then make sure your strategies are the best possible way to achieve the culture. And that's just about holding your strategies loosely, that what at any given time can help us be the kind of church that fill in the blank.
Yeah.
We'd be the kind of church that helps the next generation win. So what strategy helps us to do that best right now? And that's just a way of keeping things fresh and not fossilizing around things that used to work that maybe don't work so much anymore. I mean, that's really the challenge of culture is it's a moving target. You don't just stay the same and then you don't move and that's your culture. No, you're always moving, but how to make sure you're moving more or less toward the church you feel like you're being called to be.
Yeah, I think in some ways we might call that a culture of ongoing evaluation, or a culture of continuous improvement, or a culture of attentiveness where we go, this isn't working anymore and we need to do something different. And one of the things that we've worked at, and I think this is still a work in process for us, is trying to bring a strategy to a close before it has completely collapsed. It's like going, it's still bearing fruit, but we can feel it kind of coming towards its end. So let's take it out on a high note rather than waiting for it to be a weight on us before we address it. So some of that kind of culture of just going, let's continue to think and dream and to make it better as we go along. That continuous improvement culture, I think, is invigorating. And the right people, leaders, people that want to help with that kind of environment, they're going to be drawn to that kind of culture. Where it's like, hey, we're working on this. How could we make it better? What do you think? And kind of that curiosity around what we're doing.
Yeah. And then lastly, I just threw this in because I think it's important for cultivating or creating a culture that your church wants to be, is make it fun.
Yeah.
Make it fun. I swear, Jesse, my goal in life is to make church one big youth group, pretty much. Like, let's have fun together. Let's get closer with one another and get closer with God. And let's, I don't know.
It's almost like you were a youth pastor in a previous.
I know.
It's almost like that. Yeah. I think that's so spot on. Have fun together. Enjoy relationships with each other. Remember that this is a good, meaningful thing we're doing together. It should be enjoyable. And one of the pieces of culture that I wanted to introduce way back when is I didn't want there to be a dark underbelly to leadership, that if somebody became an elder or a staff member, all of a sudden they learn all the dark, horrible things about life behind the scenes in the church. And so I was like, let's create a culture where we're healthy and it's fun and good, and where we have honest, hard conversations together, but we do it in this relationally winsome kind of way. And so that there's not this secret dark side behind the curtain kind of deal that happens. So all of that is so important to being a healthy, flourishing church. So I don't know that we could emphasize this enough, just how much culture matters. And I would add how much you as a leader in the church, the impact that you have on shaping the culture is tremendous. And so just stopping to get on the balcony a little bit, get above the conversation, go, how is our culture? How am I contributing to the culture? Who do we want to be? And how do we move in that direction? So I'm really glad you brought this topic up, Jason, because it's vitally important.
Yeah, and it's a great reminder for me too, and what we're doing as a church. It's like, and making it fun. A quick example of that is, what is it that your people want to be doing anyway? Well, how can we lean into that? How can we attach a church value or opportunity? So, for example, we just had a group, had an offer out there for young professionals, a little different than the young adults group, which is a lot of college kids. It's young professionals, so they're into a job or whatever. And we just let's do a young professional happy hour. There's a place in town that we have a great relationship with, and they gave us for free their whole upstairs to just hang out. And it's funny, Pastor Chris, our associate pastor, was there, and he said, it was amazing. Like not only did they show up, but they all wanted to get into deep conversation unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And why? Because it sounded like a fun thing to go do, and it was the right opportunity for them to share. And if we would have said young professionals gathering at the church, it probably wouldn't have been as
Let's set
successful.
some tables in the narthex and have a conversation.
That's right. We're gonna have some O'Douls, and it's gonna anyway. Not that alcohol has to, but you know what I'm saying.
No,
But how do we make it fun is really the point.
Yeah.
And because creating culture is everything. And just I would say too, just be patient. It does take time. Be patient, and don't give up. Be consistent, and it will turn. It will become the sort of culture that you're hoping to be. Just be very clear on what culture you're trying to create.
That's right. And listen for your culture too. I think be curious about it. And when you hear people saying, I love my church because fill in the blank, it's almost always going to be, it might be a something we do, a strategy, but more often it's going to be about a culture. I love how warm and welcoming we are. I love how supported I feel by my community here. It's that kind of thing. And so culture matters a ton, and keep at it, keep working at it.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. And thank you to those who you share our podcast with your colleagues. Thank you so much for doing that. And it helps people to find us and hopefully get encouraged in their work on working on becoming flourishing churches or reaching more people for Jesus. I just love that stuff. So that's why we do what we do. If you ever want to reach out, again, Jason or Jesse at reclaimleader.com. Leave us a review. Thank you so much to those who've been leaving reviews. It's great. It's so cool to read. And because when you put stuff out into the internet, sort of don't even know what's happening to it. So it's great to see that people are tracking with what we're doing.
Right.
But anyway, any last words here, Jesse, before we jump off?
Appreciate you, man. And thanks for being in the leadership journey together with me, and all of you listening. We're glad to be in it with you too. And so we love hearing from you. So reach out. We love talking shop. So always good to connect and just continue to think and dream together about how do we lead church well. So,
because leadership is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. All right, everyone, take care.